Awesome. So, hi everybody. I'm Joel, and I'm solo because I am old and with lots of responsibility. So I decided to try and get back into game development a little bit for fun over the weekend of the game jam. It's the first one I've done in ever. Um, so a little background on this. I guess I started with the idea that I needed to do something very simple, very constrained. And I am not an artist. I am simply a programmer. And I've never aspired to be much of an artist because that takes way more time than I have or skill. So a lot of what you'll see here are Unity asset store assets. So some of the pieces are fairly arbitrary. Excuse me. What I really wanted to do is explore a general concept that as I started working on it, I became a little bit more excited about. So with the theme being duality, I decided that the duality of the map versus the territory, for any Borges fans in the audience, might be familiar with the concept. So I'll run through the game a little bit, or such what there is of it so far. And again, this is really just exploring the basic pieces and how they fit together and trying to get them working. And I'll kind of talk through the structures and mechanisms as I go, because that's the part that I think is most interesting so far. So you find yourself in this room. It has some fairly arbitrary objects in it. A nice little fireplace, door, some lamps, some stuff on a table. And if this were a bit better designed, you'd probably notice off the bat that this room and that model, I'll zoom in a bit, are the same. So there's that fireplace, for example. I noticed that the fireplace is movable, and if I pick it up and drop it over there, it goes over there. If I pick it up and drop it, somewhere up here, it goes up there. So, that's really the core conceit, is this idea that there are models in the world that represent the world itself, and that you can manipulate them in various ways to work your way through the system, work your way through the puzzles, or whatever form it ultimately takes. And if you explore a little bit, you find some pieces, which I'm going to go here and grab. In this case, I'm grabbing a couple of blocks. Can't really see them very well in my hands, but they're there. And I'll run back over here and see. So I got to traverse that hole here, and I'll drop some blocks in here, and lo and behold, there you go, the hole's starting to fill in. So I'll run over here, work my way up, and so many things missing. So if you notice, doors just kind of pop into place. Lots of animations and really basic things that I don't have in place yet. So I made it to another room. Okay. It's kind of a similar situation. In this case, I can look up. Wrong way. Look up and see there's another exit here. Got another model. As I go over here, you'll see that it doesn't seem to represent the room that I'm in. Spoiler alert, it represents the next room that I'm going to be going to. And you can get around and see the bits and pieces in here. And these puzzles are very, very simple because they're just exploring the basic concept. But the way things are structured, really all the pieces could be movable. They're just, I have them all set up to be rigid so that the path is pretty constrained. But everything you see here is, and you can tell it's fairly straightforward, fairly rectilinear in structure, is constructed with the models. So there's nothing you couldn't make dynamic if you wanted. So in this case, the puzzle, you'll see in a moment here, I'm going to go through it quickly so I don't spend a lot of time on it, but I assume that a regular person would have to explore a bit before making sense of it. But you can see here, it's going to be hard to jump those stairs, because I don't really have much of a jumping mechanism. So I'm going to drop a stairwell in place, and then way up here. Okay, I have something of a jumping mechanism in place, but that's only half baked. Okay, we're way up here, go through this door, and we will find our way into, eventually, this room. Okay, there's the stairwell I just put in place, or the stair chunk I just put in place. Now if I go up here, I'm going to skip some pieces here, you can't see a lot. there's something missing here. There's something very, very dark. I don't think this is a great manifestation of the idea, but the broad idea is that you're playing with light to hide things, so you can't quite tell what you're doing. If I were to follow this all the way up to the top, there's another door up there, but it's actually locked. So in this case, I think I could probably do a much better job making it visible to people, but there's something I need to find here in this dark area. So what I'm going to do is jump my way out of here really quickly, speed things up a bit. Okay, and I can't quite see. Oh, okay, there it goes. Can't quite see that spot in here. It's kind of hidden away, but I need to get some light in there. So what I'm going to do is pick up. Oh, it looks like I already picked it up. I have the light in my hand. In order to see there, I'm going to grab this stool. Climb the stool. Attempt to climb the stool. That's what I get for messing with the climbing mechanisms right before I go on live. Get in here, place myself a little brazier, which at present is the only real light mechanism that I've got that's dynamic. Work my way back up here. Wait, what's this? Oh, well, this isn't perfect, but there's a key down there you can't quite see. Again, this is all very last-minute puzzle design, such as, if it's not fair to call it design at all. Let's see, here we go. Okay, now I've got that mechanism here. I've got this light. Now I can see there's another model hiding in here, and if you look carefully, you can see that's the room I was just looking into with the key. I'm going to grab that piece, move it out, work my way down, cheat my way to make this faster. Okay, you can see the walls moved. I'm going to grab the key. It's gigantic right now, so that it works with the mechanism that I have for doors. And work my way up to the top. And use the key to open the door. And there we go, the end. So such as it is, that's what we have so far. Couple of comments on it. I think the again, there's a lot of sort of half-baked pieces at this point. What I would like to do with this is, I started off, again, it was just a quick sort of weekend hack. Let's see what I can get done quickly with some off-the-shelf parts. But as I got into it, I discovered there are really a lot of interesting puzzles I think you could do with this. That this demo does not do a great job elucidating, but excuse me, given the generality of that mechanism, the idea that you can create models in the world, you can have models that describe and control the world. You can. They're very general in structure, so they're very simple. That's intentional, so that there aren't a lot of invalid states, right? Any pieces you can put together in a sane way produce a reasonably sane world. And if you imagine, for example, there are a lot more things we could do with light. There are a lot more things you could do with doors and mechanisms for controlling them. Any kind of portal. I think there's a lot of opportunities to play with water. Potentially enemies of some kind, even if they're. I'm not a huge fan of fighting games. I think I'm just too old for it, and I'm not very good at them. But I love games. Stealth games, things like Thief and so forth, where you spend a lot of time trying to plan your way through a world without actually causing a ruckus. So you can imagine ways that you have to kind of work your way through a world by controlling, by controlling the structure and finding the pieces you need to control the structure in such a way that you can get through, more complex puzzles, get around enemies, generally avoid commotion. probably a million more things I'm not thinking of right now. But my near-term goal is, and this is entirely a spare time project for me, but my near-term goal is to get it into a state where, excuse me, it will be a lot easier for people to add content and structure to play with without having to go hack around in the Unity editor. Right now, you can't quite do that, but it's not a huge leap to get to that point. And when you harken back to the old days of, I mean, going way back, games like Load Runner and things like that, where a lot of the fun of those games was actually creating your own content, was creating your own levels or structures. I'd like to capture a little bit of that. Maybe not as completely abstract and simplistic. I'd like there to be some story, some coherence to it. But I really like the idea that people can kind of create their own content with the pieces, with the general pieces that all kind of work together in a coherent way, so that it's not rocket surgery to create a new level. It's actually just sort of fairly straightforward, and it can even be done in game depending on how you decide to approach that. And also that because it's a spare time project for me, it makes it a lot easier to bring outside people in to help flesh out the ideas, suggest structures and mechanisms that could be added to it, because they're actively creating their own, exploring their own ideas. That's for me, I think that's the way it's most likely to turn into something that more people can enjoy if it is something that a lot more people can contribute. So that's about it. That's what I've got right now.
All right, great.
Look, any questions or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good comments, more than questions. Timothy Johnson says, that's pretty cool. Logan Zimmerman, one of your competitors in the competition, when you're showing off the puzzle mechanics, says, I love that mechanic. Looks really fun and unique.
Appreciate that.
I commented that I love building levels in games. We're going to talk about UCG in a minute. Timothy Johnson recommended 2-player competitive mode where they trap each other. Imagine having to trap enemies and such. A super fun mechanic. So yeah, let's talk about UCG. And you can keep showing that stream. We don't have to show our mugs. If you want to put the stream back up, we can show it again.
Sure.
Let people continue to enjoy the environments you built. So yeah, so obviously I love UCG, Emperor of the Fading Sun. We still have mod communities dating back to the mid-90s operating. In fact, we're doing a new patch right now to make it even easier to mod. But how would you see people developing this? I mean, essentially, your whole game is about designing the levels on the fly, redesigning the levels within the game. So are you going to have an interface outside of Unity for people to make their levels? How do you see that working?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the short answer is I actually don't know, but I'd like it to be as built in as possible. As it stands, what I'm working on right now is really it's more just an in-game mode. With the idea being that I'd still like there to be, or at least have the option of working towards something where the game does have a coherent narrative. I'm still toying around with ideas for that. I don't even know if it shares this visual theme. Again, those were just assets that I had lying around. But I'd like there to be some coherence to it. So if you look at something like, again, I know I'm dating myself, but like Load Runner or something in that era, the puzzles were very abstract. Any fiction on it was a very thin facade at most. I'd like there to be more than that because I'm a huge fan of old school 90s role-playing games. I've worked on more than a few of them, or more than I'd care to admit. And I like that aspect, but if you take the sort of in-game level design structures to their limit, then it is actually sort of a level editor. So how do you balance that flexibility within the game without completely breaking the narrative? On the other hand, you want to allow people to create their own content. Then where do they do that? And in the game is the most obvious place to do it. So I'm thinking maybe kind of a modality or a modal structure where you can switch to an in-game mode that allows you to add new areas or what have you. Maybe link them into the existing world. Maybe create them from scratch. And at the very least, for the near term, it will certainly be front and center because there is no narrative, there is no content to speak of. So I'd like that to change, and the best way to make that change is to get other people involved. As far as the narrative goes, the first thing that jumps to mind, which I think could be kind of fun, is to dredge up a little of the feel of a bit of a roguelike, but upside down, like you're trying to work your way out rather than in, and maybe a little bit of a feel of a dungeon keeper or something like that. A little bit of that for those who remember that game. A little bit of that kind of snarky, a little bit of Terry Pratchett sort of. You've stumbled your way into a dungeon that's sort of half constructed, and you're discovering the ephemera of all the arguments about how it should be built, and the models are kind of the magical detritus of its partial construction. At least that could be kind of a fun way to approach it without getting too serious. But we'll see. Open to ideas, though.
It's more than an illusionist then. Some more comments. Guy with a lot of cheese says, very cool. Good job, everyone. Timothy Johnson says, one of my razor statements of game design. If something is designable, then you're on the right track. And just in this chat, there's a lot of, it'd be cool if you could. Great job. Let's talk about puzzles really quickly, because you alluded to the fact you did work with some very good puzzle designers of classic computer game puzzles. What are the elements of a good puzzle for you?
Me, what's interesting, I've worked with some very good designers. I'm not one of them. So that's an important distinction I should call out up front. I think for me, personally, what I enjoy and what I'm most adept at doing, I think, is, and I've alluded to it several times in this discussion, is the ability to work with a very general set of pieces that work together in a coherent way. It's almost, if you're familiar with the concept of like configuration space from physics, like there shouldn't be any invalid states, right? Or at least as few as possible, because that to me is what leads to serendipity in design. You put together pieces in novel ways, and things more or less just work. It may not be what you want, but at least they more or less are functional. You don't have to spend quite so much time up front thinking about what you want them to do, and then you're not as biased towards a particular outcome. Whereas if you have to really create the pieces, you have to go through a lot of manual labor to reify a design that's in your head. Then you're pretty wedded to that concept. By the time you get to the end of it, you're like, well, this puzzle kind of sucks, but we don't have time to create another one. Anybody who played Skyrim and the only puzzle in the entire game was spinning obelisks in some dungeon, right? Just about. I feel like that was one of those things where they probably wanted to do a lot more. I bet the cutting room floor is covered in great ideas that no one had time to implement. So on the other hand, if you can just throw pieces together and see what happens, then the emergent properties of a design are, you're much more likely to be surprised by them. And honestly, I think I'll give you one thing. This is a great answer, I think. At least it feels good to me right now. If the person who designed the puzzle can be surprised by the solutions, that is a good principle. For me personally, I don't like really highly constrained puzzles where there's one answer. I don't need them to be incredibly intellectually challenging, but I like them to be delightful and surprising. So if the designer didn't know that there was a solution to it, that's usually a good sign. This means you've got more of a systems puzzle and less of kind of a, highly constrained puzzle.
Less of a scripted puzzle. All right, great answer. All right, Joel, while we let people type in any last comments or questions, why don't you tell people how they can contact you if they want to create some Schism UCG, Schism CG?
So right now the best place is I created a little dead empty Discord channel with a couple people talking in it. There is I believe there's a link to the Game Jam site, which contains the itch.io link on it. I'm trying to do everything there, and on the Discord, on sort of the devlog on the itch.io link, and I actually have a Codex bug tracker set up as well. So because I will forget what I'm working on if I don't have some way to track it, which you can actually it's just public as well. But yeah, hop in the Discord channel, throw out ideas. Ask me to do things so that you can play with them. That's totally fine. My hope, and like I said earlier, the only way I'm gonna make any progress on this, honestly, is to have other people kind of throwing out ideas and helping me kind of chip away at it.
Man, do we wish we had Discords for our fans back in the old days to have kept them involved.
We had modems.
Yeah. All right, Joel, great stuff. Thank you for the look at Schism. I have posted in YouTube the links to your Global Game Jam site and the itch.io devlog. So, all right. Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for watching. Join us again March 8th, when we will have a month of further work on all these games, and we can see how they've advanced and what their plans are for the future. So, subscribe to this channel, like this video, it shows up in the algorithm of the people who need to see it. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Schism. Thank you, Diane Mesh Studios for Spirit, and Tread Lightly. And we will see you all again March 8th.